What drives a mother to choose between her children and murder? What depth of desperation transforms maternal instinct into something so dark that it defies our very understanding of love? In a quiet suburban neighborhood, a dashcam would capture the final moments of a father's life. A father whose only crime was wanting to see his children. A veterinary vial containing a substance 1,000 times more potent than morphine. Court documents detailing a bitter custody battle. A seemingly normal family home that harbored deadly secrets. And a dashcam recording that would reveal a carefully orchestrated trap. This isn't just another true crime story. This is a warning about how custody battles can spiral into unthinkable tragedy, when desperation, obsession, and the dark corners of the internet converge. Welcome to True Crime Stories 24/7, where we dive deep into cases that challenge our understanding of human nature. But before we continue, I need to warn you that today's episode contains content that some viewers may find disturbing, including discussions of family violence and premeditated murder. Also, the content shared in this video comes from publicly available information and news reports. While every effort has been made to present it accurately, names, locations, and certain details may have been modified to protect privacy. Our purpose is to inform and raise awareness. We do not promote or support violence in any form. If you value in-depth true crime analysis that goes beyond the headlines to examine the why behind these tragic events, if you believe in learning from history to prevent future tragedies, then join our growing community by hitting subscribe and the notification bell. Your engagement helps us continue sharing these important stories. With that said, let's continue. What you're about to witness is a story that unfolded over years. A tale of how a mother's determination to maintain control of her children led her down a path of no return. We'll examine how a combination of international intrigue, modern technology, and a mother's desperate choices all culminated in a carefully planned murder that would tear a family apart forever. But to understand how this tragedy unfolded, we need to go back to when this family seemed to have it all. Take a moment and picture a life that many would consider the American dream. A successful husband working for the U.S. Department of State, a devoted stay-at-home mom, and 3 beautiful children. Their social media told a story of weekend soccer games, family vacations, and perfectly orchestrated holiday photos. They were the kind of family that made others wonder, how do they make it look so easy? But we all know that perfection is often just a carefully constructed illusion. What would you do if someone threatened to take your children? It's a question that strikes fear into any parent's heart. But sometimes, the greatest threat isn't from outside the family at all. Their story began like many others, with hope, promise, and dreams of a perfect future. She was a young woman with aspirations of creating the ideal family life. And the husband? He was a rising star in diplomatic service, bringing the promise of adventure and international travel. Their wedding photos showed beaming smiles, loving glances, and all the optimism that new love brings. The early years seemed to fulfill that promise. As his career flourished, they moved from post to post, creating homes in different corners of the world. Their children were born into a life of privilege and opportunity, private international schools, exposure to different cultures, and the kind of global perspective that most families can only dream of. But beneath the surface of diplomatic functions and expatriate gatherings, hairline cracks were beginning to appear. The constant moves that seemed so exciting during courtship began to wear on their foundation. Each new posting meant another restart, another adjustment, another period of isolation. For her, the role of diplomatic spouse came with its own unique pressures. While he attended high-level meetings and built his career, she navigated the delicate social waters of embassy life. Every dinner party had to be perfect. Every child's behavior had to be exemplary. Their family represented American interests abroad, and that burden weighed heavily. The children became her world, her anchor in the shifting sands of diplomatic life. With each move, she grew more protective, more focused on maintaining their routine, their stability. What started as natural maternal concern slowly began to evolve into something more, something that would later be described as obsessive control. Their posting to South Africa should have been another adventure, another chapter in their global journey. Instead, it became the turning point where subtle tensions erupted into visible cracks. The isolation of diplomatic life, the pressure of maintaining appearances, and the growing distance between husband and wife created a perfect storm. During embassy functions, careful observers might have noticed the slight tension in her smile when he spoke about their next posting. The way she would grip the children's hands a little tighter when he discussed their education plans. The subtle way she would redirect conversations away from their future movements. It was in South Africa that she first began to voice concerns about the children's stability. What started as reasonable discussions about schooling options evolved into heated debates about the impact of their mobile lifestyle. She began to research studies about third-culture kids, citing statistics about attachment disorders and educational disruption. Looking back, the red flags were there, waving in the diplomatic breeze. The way she began to schedule the children's activities during his working hours. The growing resistance to embassy social functions. The increasing isolation from the diplomatic community. And most significantly, her newfound friendship with a local citizen who seemed to understand her frustrations all too well. But who could have predicted that these warning signs would lead to such a devastating conclusion? That a mother's desire to protect her children would twist into something so dark? That a family built on international service would crumble under the weight of secrets, lies, and ultimately, murder? The truth is, by the time anyone recognized these red flags for what they were, the plan was already in motion. A plan that would bring this family's story to a tragic end, leaving 3 children without a father and forcing us all to question, how well do we really know the people we love? South Africa was meant to be just another posting, another line on a diplomatic resume. Instead, it became the catalyst for a series of events that would shatter this family forever. The sprawling diplomatic compound in Pretoria offered a life of luxury, but for her, it felt like a gilded cage. While her husband immersed himself in diplomatic duties, she found herself increasingly drawn to the local community outside the compound walls. Away from the watchful eyes of embassy staff, away from the expectations of diplomatic life. It was during a seemingly innocent community event that she first met him, Anthony, a local citizen who would later play a crucial role in this tragedy. Unlike the diplomatic circles she'd grown tired of, Anthony offered something different. Understanding, sympathy, and most dangerously, validation of her growing resentments. What began as casual conversations over coffee evolved into lengthy discussions about her frustrations. For the first time, someone was telling her she was right to worry about the impact of diplomatic life on her children. Right to question the constant moves. Right to want more control. The relationship deepened in the shadows of embassy functions and school pickups. Text messages turned into secret meetings. Meetings turned into plans. And somewhere in this web of emotional intimacy, the first seeds of a devastating plot were planted. But it wasn't just about a failing marriage anymore. The children had become pawns in an increasingly complex game of control. She began documenting every minor parenting disagreement, building a case for what she saw as her husband's destabilizing influence on their lives. Each new posting opportunity became a battleground, with the children's well-being her weapon of choice. When her husband would plan family outings, she'd suddenly schedule competing activities. Parent-teacher conferences became solo events, with important information selectively shared. The children's schedules grew increasingly complex, making it harder for their father to maintain meaningful connections during his limited free time. Picture 3 young children, caught in an invisible tug-of-war. They didn't understand why mommy never came to embassy events anymore. Why daddy's attempts to join school functions were met with last-minute changes. Why tension filled the air every time their parents were in the same room. The breaking point came with the announcement of another potential posting. But this time, something was different. This time, she had Anthony's sympathetic ear and a growing determination that her children would never leave South Africa. The divorce filing shocked the diplomatic community, but what followed would prove even more disturbing. As court proceedings began, a pattern emerged, a systematic campaign to separate the children from their father. Every court-ordered visitation became a battlefield. Every scheduled call met with technical difficulties. Every attempt at co-parenting thwarted. The courts tried to intervene. Orders were issued, schedules were mandated, but with each ruling, her defiance grew stronger. Documentation piled up. Missed visitations, denied phone calls, violated court orders. But documents and court orders are just paper. And paper proved powerless against a mother's desperate determination. Could anyone have prevented what was coming? The warning signs were there. The increasing isolation of the children. The systematic documentation of every perceived parental failing. The growing network of enablers. The calculated defiance of court orders. And most chillingly, the quiet research into methods of permanent solution. Mental health professionals might have recognized the patterns. Family court advocates might have seen the escalation. But in a system designed to believe in the best of human nature, who could have predicted the depths of darkness that lay ahead? As the courts began to favor her husband's position, as visitation rights were enforced, as summer custody arrangements were finalized, she began to plan, not for an appeal, not for mediation, not for compromise. No, she began to plan for something far more sinister. In her mind, the equation had become terrifyingly simple. If the courts could force her to share her children, then the courts would have to be removed from the equation. If legal means couldn't prevent her husband from having access to their children, then perhaps other means would have to be considered. And so began the methodical research, the careful preparations, the gathering of allies, all while maintaining a facade of reluctant compliance with court orders, all while letting her husband believe that maybe, just maybe, co-parenting could work. Little did he know that every shared moment with his children, every court-mandated visitation, every seemingly peaceful exchange, was bringing him one step closer to a carefully laid trap. A trap that would soon snap shut with devastating consequences. The transformation from desperate mother to methodical planner didn't happen overnight. It began with late-night internet searches, casual questions to veterinary contacts, and seemingly innocent conversations about pharmaceutical access. Each step calculated, each move designed to avoid suspicion. What investigators would later discover sent chills through even the most seasoned law enforcement officers. Her browser history revealed a shocking progression. Untraceable poisons, fatal drug doses, animal tranquilizers, human effects. How to make death look natural. But it wasn't just research. She was building a network, carefully selecting people who could be manipulated into helping her. Her mother, who would later claim she didn't think it would really happen, became an unwitting accomplice. And Anthony, her connection from South Africa, proved to be the missing piece she needed. The choice of weapon was far from random. M99, also known as atropine, isn't something you accidentally stumble upon. It's a controlled substance so potent that veterinarians use it to sedate elephants. 1,000 times stronger than morphine, and nearly impossible to trace without specific testing. Through Anthony's connections, the pieces began falling into place. The drug was acquired, the location was chosen, the alibis were crafted. Even the burial site was selected and prepared, all while maintaining the appearance of a mother simply struggling with custody arrangements. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of the preparation was her attention to detail. Cell phone records would later reveal hundreds of deleted messages coordinating every aspect of the plan. She researched police response times in the area. She studied her husband's routines, his habits, his vulnerabilities. She even went so far as to create a series of seemingly normal text messages to be sent after it was done. Messages that would paint a picture of a man who simply disappeared. Messages that would have worked, if not for one crucial oversight, her husband's dashcam. The final weekend began like any other court-mandated visitation. The children, excited to see their father, packed their overnight bags. He arrived right on schedule, unaware that every moment of this seemingly routine exchange was orchestrated for a specific purpose. Those children, those innocent children, had no idea they were being used as bait in a deadly trap. Their excitement about spending time with their father was genuine. Their joy at his promises of weekend adventures was real. And the surprise their mother mentioned when they returned? They had no way of knowing what that really meant. The dashcam footage from that day provides a haunting timeline. We see him arriving, cheerful and punctual. We see the children running to his car, weekend bags bouncing against their backs. We hear him promising to bring them back Sunday evening, a promise he would keep, not knowing it would be his last act as their father. And then, that final Sunday evening, the children were returned as promised. The exchange should have been routine, but the dashcam was still recording. "I have a surprise for you inside," her voice rings clear on the recording. The children, tired from their weekend adventures, eagerly rush into the house with their grandmother. And then, the recording captures everything. His confusion. "What the heck are you doing?" His realization. "Did you just assault me?" The struggle. "Get away from me. Get off of me." The dashcam footage continues for several agonizing minutes. We hear the struggle. We hear his voice weaken. We hear, the moment a father's life ends, just feet away from the children he loved so much. But what makes this footage particularly shocking isn't just what we see and hear. It's what we know was happening just out of frame, the calculated injection of a substance so potent it would stop his heart within minutes. The practiced movements of someone who had rehearsed this moment countless times in her mind. The terrible efficiency of a plan months in the making. As the dashcam's recording ended, what followed was a sequence of events that had been rehearsed countless times in the minds of those involved. The children, still inside with their grandmother, remained oblivious to the horror unfolding in their driveway. Their excited chatter about the surprise their mother promised provided an eerie soundtrack to the methodical actions taking place outside. The next few hours would reveal the true depths of this conspiracy. While the children were distracted upstairs, 3 adults moved with horrifying efficiency. His car needed to be moved. Evidence needed to be disposed of. A story needed to be crafted. And most disturbingly, a father's body needed to disappear. The cover-up began immediately. His phone was disabled. His smartwatch was removed. Every digital breadcrumb that could trace his final moments was systematically eliminated. They had planned for everything, or so they thought. But what about the children? How do you explain to 3 young souls why Daddy didn't say goodbye? How do you maintain normalcy when you've just orchestrated their father's murder? The answer is as chilling as the crime itself. You lie. You create a story. You pretend. The next morning, those children woke up to what seemed like any other day. They went to school. They followed their routine. They had no idea that their last hug, their last "I love you," their last moment with their father, had already happened. The missing person report was filed with calculated timing, not too soon to raise suspicion, not too late to seem uncaring. His car was found abandoned in a carefully chosen location. The story seemed perfect, a father who simply disappeared. But investigations have a way of uncovering even the most carefully hidden truths. The first crack appeared when hotel staff reported his failure to check out. His meticulous nature made the abandoned room seem out of character. Then came his work colleagues' concerns. Missed meetings, unanswered emails, behavior completely unlike the dedicated diplomat they knew. Digital forensics would prove to be the key. While his phone and watch had been disabled, investigators discovered a goldmine of evidence in the cloud. Deleted messages, location data, search histories. Each digital footprint telling part of a story that would soon unravel the entire conspiracy. But it was the dashcam footage that changed everything. Those final moments, captured in high definition, turned a missing person case into something far more sinister. The audio of his last words. The sound of the struggle. The chilling efficiency of his murder. The investigation revealed layers of premeditation that shocked even veteran detectives. The carefully researched choice of M99. The pre-dug gravesite. The international conspiracy to obtain the drug. The calculated use of the children as unwitting bait. The grandmother's complicity. The lover's role in acquiring the lethal substance. As arrests were made, the full scope of the conspiracy came to light. 3 people had worked together to orchestrate a father's death: a mother, her lover, and a grandmother. Each played their part. Each made their choices. Each would face the consequences. The legal proceedings that followed would lay bare the calculated nature of the crime. Prosecutors presented evidence of year-long planning. Financial records showed suspicious transactions. Travel documents revealed coordinated movements. And perhaps most damning, the digital trail of research into methods of murder. But at the center of this legal storm were 3 children. Children who had to learn the impossible truth: that their mother, the person they trusted most in the world, had deliberately taken their father from them. That their grandmother, who should have protected them, had helped hide the truth. That their entire world had been built on a foundation of lies. The sentencing hearing brought this tragic story full circle. 40 years in prison for the mother who chose murder over co-parenting. 18 years for the lover who provided the means. 10 years for the grandmother who helped conceal the truth. But no sentence could restore what 3 children had lost. How do we protect children from family violence when it comes from those they trust most? What systems failed? What signs were missed? These questions haunt everyone involved in this case. The warning signs were there: the escalating custody dispute, the pattern of parental alienation, the international connections that facilitated the crime, the systematic isolation of the children, the calculated defiance of court orders. Yet somehow, these red flags weren't enough to prevent tragedy. And now, 3 children must grow up carrying the weight of this terrible truth: that the people who should have protected them most instead orchestrated their greatest loss. As we analyze this tragedy, certain patterns emerge. Patterns that, if recognized early, might prevent similar catastrophes. The escalation of this custody battle followed a trajectory that family court experts have seen before, but with consequences few could have imagined. Let's examine the red flags that, in hindsight, painted a clear picture of impending disaster. First, there was the systematic isolation. What began as protective behavior evolved into complete control of the children's access to their father. Every missed call, every canceled visit, every last-minute schedule change. These weren't random occurrences. They were calculated steps in a larger plan to sever relationships. The manipulation of support systems was equally calculated. Family members, friends, even school officials were fed carefully crafted narratives. Each story designed to paint a picture of a concerned mother protecting her children from an unstable situation. The truth was deliberately obscured behind layers of seemingly reasonable concerns. For those watching who might recognize these patterns in their own lives or the lives of others, there are resources available. Family court advocates who specialize in high-conflict custody cases, mental health professionals trained in parental alienation, support groups for parents navigating difficult custody situations, legal resources for documenting concerning behaviors, crisis hotlines for when situations escalate. The broader implications of this case force us to examine our family court system itself. How do we balance parental rights with children's safety? When should authorities intervene? What powers should courts have to enforce custody agreements? The tragic reality is that our current system often operates on good faith, an assumption that parents will ultimately put their children's well-being first. But what happens when that assumption proves fatally wrong? Consider these critical questions. Should custody evaluations include psychological assessments? How can we better monitor compliance with court orders? What role should technology play in documenting interactions? When should law enforcement become involved? How do we protect children while preserving family bonds? The ripple effects of this tragedy extend far beyond one family. 3 children will grow up processing unimaginable trauma. Extended family members must reconcile their roles in what happened. A community must examine how such darkness flourished in their midst. But perhaps the most profound impact is on our collective understanding of family violence. This case shattered the notion that maternal love is always protective. It forced us to confront the uncomfortable truth that sometimes the greatest threats come from those we trust most. The long-term consequences of this case continue to unfold. Legislative changes are being considered. Court procedures are being reviewed. Support systems are being strengthened. But for 3 children, these changes come too late. As we conclude this episode, let's take a moment to remember a father who simply wanted to be part of his children's lives. A man whose death exposed critical failures in our system. A tragedy that demands we do better. For those working in family courts, for mental health professionals, for law enforcement, for anyone involved in custody disputes, let this case serve as both a warning and a call to action. The red flags were there. The system had opportunities to intervene. The consequences of failure were catastrophic. Like I said earlier, if you noticed and of these patterns in your own life or the lives of others around, please don't wait. Reach out. Seek help. Document everything. Trust your instincts. There are people and organizations ready to help. Remember, custody battles don't have to become warfare. Co-parenting is possible. Children deserve to love and be loved by both parents. And no disagreement about custody should ever end in violence. If this has impacted you, please share it with others who might benefit from these lessons. Join our community in raising awareness about family violence and supporting those navigating difficult custody situations. In the end, this isn't just a true crime story. It's a wake-up call. A reminder that when it comes to protecting children, we all have a role to play. And perhaps most importantly, it's a testament to why we must never ignore the warning signs. Because sometimes, lives depend on it. This case represents not just a failure of individuals, but a failure of systems, of oversight, of protection. May we learn from it. May we do better. And may we never forget the price of inaction. Till I come your way again, please stay vigilant. Thanks for watching, and God bless you.